wanted to try to get a feel for the room to see who all of you are as well. I'm curious how many of you are in TV? Nice. Okay, great. How many of you in newspapers? Bring it up, man. Way up. It's all good.
Digital only newsroom.
Cool. Very cool.
How many of you are like data experts, programming, know everything about data?
Just get out.
We'll come to you for our questions.
Cool. Well, I'll introduce myself first. Just as part of the lineup, I'm Jake Whittenberg. I'm an anchor reporter at King 5 News in Seattle. I've had a really fun journey over the past 6 months getting to know what data journalism is and how it can apply to what we do in our TV newsroom, which is not on the data journalism mindset right now. I actually got started as any other TV reporter would, covering house fires, shootings, a actual honeybee truck that overturned, which was interesting back in 2012. One of the most horrific things I've ever covered, not once, but twice. It happened a second time, believe it or not, and had a lot of bee stings. So anyway, just to give you a few examples of what I do and how not data journalism-y it is. So it has been fun to kind of adapt to this new style. I'll let Taylor explain her role too.
Hi, I'm Taylor Mirfendereski. I work at King with Jake, and I'm a multimedia journalist. I focus on special projects and investigations. A lot of my stuff is online, digital focused, and I also do TV versions of it. But I have a lot more time than Jake to work on projects, you know, we work together on this pilot project, which we're going to tell you about. But I always use data to enhance my stories online and also to put it in TV-friendly styles. So.
I am a former print person. I usually sit, but I'm Vera Chan. I'm a senior media experiences manager at Microsoft. I'm actually new to the team, which is the Microsoft Modern Journalism team. But even though I'm only on my 110th day, the team itself is actually less than a year old. It actually grew out of a data journalism program, and where we've partnered with a lot of newsrooms like AP, Recode, Politico, EU, and of course King 5 right in our backyard. I'll talk a little bit after we get to see all the glory that's happening when they started off each of their data journey, but I will talk about later on, just besides Excel and Power BI, what other tools that we're actually moving into in our technology stack department with all of you guys.
Cool. It's been a really fun partnership so far. So let's get a sense of some of your challenges. We want to hear more about what is holding you back as well. Taylor, do you want to describe the pilot project first?
Yeah, before we get to the challenges, we're going to tell you about why we're sitting here. So Jake and I worked with Microsoft on a partnership where basically King 5 was doing a pilot project with the goal of figuring out how can we make data stories look good on TV, how can we find compelling ways to use data in our reporting. And we did this partnership for 2.5 months, 2.5 months, where we basically partnered with Microsoft. We used Power BI, which is their data visualization tool. They offered us support, and we're really lucky to have them in our backyard here in Seattle. And so we were basically just experimenting and figuring out new ways that we could tell stories. And we'll show you a clip of our sizzle reel from what we were able to do together.
Here's what we came up with.
King 5 is tracking the fundraising dollars, paying extra close attention to the congressional races in Washington's 8th District and Eastern Washington's 5th District.
Gas prices doesn't look like they're going to be getting any higher this summer, and they are high compared to the past few years.
But really, they've been significantly lower compared to the past decade. Remember that spike? We hit a high in July of 2008 of $4.35 a gallon.
100 largest cities in the country, King 5's unique analysis found only 12 have females running the police department. And of those 12, 7 are African American women. The newest, of course, Carmen Best here in Seattle.
Public health experts feel confident that they can minimize the spread of the disease to others. But a King 5 analysis of Department of Health data spanning back 20 years found that statewide, we've never reached that goal.
But what about the kids? The newest youth survey in the state found that the number of 10th graders using marijuana in the past 30 days has actually increased since 2002. But look, right here in 2012, when it became legalized, that number started to decline ever so slightly.
So why aren't some students getting immunized? Well, a chunk of them are out of compliance, meaning they haven't turned in paperwork to excuse them.
So more money is coming in. Where does it all go when you purchase cannabis in the state of Washington? Well, here is this interactive map, also on king5.com tonight.
We analyzed data on every major wildfire since 2005 and found while the average burn time for a single wildfire used to be 5 or 6 days, they now last longer on average.
As always, the truth is in the numbers. Right now, most foreign-born residents in King County come from India, then China, and the third largest number of immigrants according to the census come from Mexico.
Yeah, so it's been really, really fun experimenting with this new style. Like I said, it's taken me to a whole nother level as a journalist, been able to open my eyes and really try to flex the creative muscle. And it turns out that's what data journalism needs. If you're gonna put it on TV, I found you've got to really dig into how to get creative. So let's get back to those challenges. So we wanna know from you guys, what's holding you back? If you're interested in putting data journalism in your newsroom culture, give me an idea, what might be holding you back?
I just had a question from what you just showed us. So how much of that was kind of driven by your producer? Was it more like you're bringing ideas to people and they're going with it?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, we had, and one of our producers, Russ Walker, is actually here with us. He was a big part of the pilot project too. And a lot of our ideas came either from an idea maybe Russ had, or just a genuine curiosity. And it all comes from that same curiosity that fuels the daily turns anyway, whether it's data journalism or not. So what I found was that if you do pick a topic, you need to think through the topics you pick before you dive into the data, because it's such a commitment to go through the data process, as you already know. So a lot of it was just things that were topical. Wildfires, this was a pilot project we did during the summer when the fires were burning. Daily turn was the police chief. We'll get into that in another minute, but just genuine curiosity led the way on that.
The time was always, like, how long is it gonna take? Because I have to do dailies too, and taking care of like a 3-month analysis, and not just analysis, because you gotta request it, you gotta have it requested and clean it, visualize it, and then figure out how you can visualize. I had a computer break down on me because my graphics were just that many. So it couldn't handle the graphics, so visualization and time has been a really big thing against us, plus the editing.
Yes.
Data editing, my boss is really good at just the common sense part of it, but the data sometimes is a little complex, and so we have to talk through it a lot.
Right, good. Yes, we talk about that as well.
Yeah. Well, I guess my biggest challenge in my newsroom is that if the word data is brought up, everyone's just like, oh, that's you over there in the corner, like, I don't want to touch that, like, but how long did it take you to create those graphics?
Who did that?
Yeah, so we experimented with a variety of different graphics, and I'll give you some examples shortly too of ways that you can do it without the graphics.
Oh, great.
Actually, I'm going to talk about that next. Does anyone have any other questions? I'll just dive right into that next.
Another challenge is I work for a public broadcaster, this TV, radio, and web. I am mostly web, so I created something digital primarily. And then when it's about to roll out, then the thinking goes like, okay, how are we going to cover this in broadcast, right? Like it's brought at the very last minute. There's not enough time to think about, okay, what would be TV, good for TV in this, instead of just like jamming it in there, right?
Right. Yeah, no, love it. That is the core issue, taking data journalism to broadcast. Absolutely.
I work for BBC News, that is, of course, massively TV driven, and I'm a data journalist, so I kind of hardcore coding and stuff. And most of the time, the reporters, so like the journalists will come to me and ask for charts inside their TV business. However, what actually could stop is the predisposition in doing that. There are some reporters that want too much, and they don't have probably the capability of explaining that particular data. So they more come to me and saying not, I want to show this, or say, can you do a fancy line chart doing this and that? Something that data journalists really love. Like a lack of predisposition towards data. So they did their job for 20 years, always the same way. So why they should get something new in their video piece?
We'll get through some of those challenges and
Yeah.
someone can
Yeah.
get more to bring them up as we go along.
Yeah, so let's start with the non-visual, right? The biggest challenge that we have found, and we'll get through 4 different challenges that we have encountered that we've worked through to find solutions for. The first one, the big, as you guys have just mentioned, it is just not that visual. When you think of data journalism on its surface, you're thinking of the numbers, you're thinking of Excel, you're thinking of Power BI. You might not be thinking about some of the visuals that go along with it. So some of the examples here, this is an orca story we did. Orca is a massive issue in Washington State because of the genuine, possible extinction of the southern resident pods. And so one of the challenges we found in our business too, as all of you know, is the time, because there is not enough time in the day to do a data story. There's not enough resources. The producers want more. We have 11 and a half hours of news at King 5. There's not enough time to dig into a data journalism story. So also the platforms, right? You've got social media, you've got YouTube, you've got Facebook, and all these different departments want to be satisfied in some way. So the eureka moment that I found with this example, this is a marijuana story. Marijuana is also big in Washington State. We have a lot of it. So is this idea of satisfying all the platforms at once. So if everybody wants something and you only have so much time to give it to them, what is one way that you can get bigger bang for your buck? And we found that this is one way to do that. This is a story about our viaduct. We have a very busy bridge that was demolished in Seattle, and so we did a more analytical approach of what would happen if it was removed. And we put in a lot of time with Microsoft, with Revel Communication, consulting firm to help dig into some of the data. And so Adobe After Effects surfaced for us. We had a freelance editor who was really interested in Adobe After Effects, and so we threw some scripts at him. We had him churn some stuff out. We also worked with our graphics tag. Tegna, the company we work for, is really big into hubs. So they put their graphics hub, I think it's in Denver. And so we put them to the test and trying some different solutions.
How many of you guys have a graphics department where you work?
Yeah, that's nice actually, to still have that in-house. Other ideas, it doesn't even have to be Adobe After Effects, which is a hard program, for some people to learn. For a graphic designer who may be really eager to learn, it's a really great idea. Another idea that we came up with was to literally just have a clipboard, and we help chart people through some certain kinds of data sets that we wanted to present. And so nothing super fancy about some of this stuff, but it is just an example of how to do it without Adobe After Effects. We have a really cool tool called the Microsoft Surface Hub, which is this gigantic, cool touchscreen TV. So we've experimented a lot with putting bar graphs and charts on that as another way to explain things. Another visual element I used on an education story was, we talked about where all taxpayer money is going to be allocated for education in the state. I had 4 rain buckets and a handful of loose change. It doesn't have to be Adobe After Effects, but it can be visual in other ways. So that was the first challenge we had to come up with, was how to make it interesting on TV.
Do you have any questions about that style? Any logistical questions about how? Yeah, go ahead.
With the that right there at the Surface Hub, we have a storyteller touchscreen, and it has its own wrapping capabilities, but they're kind of a pain. Is this Power BI, is that something you do on the Microsoft Hub? Do you use that? Is this something where you get my jumping at too much?
No, actually, I totally can address it. We have Microsoft Power BI and Excel. They've been fantastic resources for us to sort, cleanse, and interview the data. We have tried extensively with putting Power BI on the Surface, and we're working through the challenges of that being super visual. So the Adobe After Effects just kind of elevates that to another level, brings it to life. Whereas we've found, at least I have, that the Power BI stuff works really well online, which Taylor's going to get to in a second. But also for almost a tease, for example, I would finish my story and I would come out and I would tease the website and say, take a look at what you can do on king5.com yourself in an interactive way. That was a really good use of Power BI for me.
Prompter or no prompter when using graphics?
In the in-studio stuff? I think Taylor might have used one, and
To explain the stuff, I didn't use a prompter.
yeah, it's.
He's different. I don't know what he does.
I try to not use the prompter. It's just my style. I like to try to make it more natural. But it can.
Live is just makes me nervous because I've done it live. I'm trying to explain a graphic, but I look away, the prompter's moving,
Right.
and I can't catch it. Like I miss a step, and you can tell.
Right.
Is there a more seamless way of doing it, or is it just
Track a
better?
package.
Bullet points.
Track a package. That's a good solution for that. You know, bullet points. You know, could be easy as well. It's if you did the bullet points, you'd have to boil it down. You know, to some pretty simple answers from the kind of what you got out of the data.
I just try to work off bullet points when I'm recording, even if you have a full script for.
Oh, I see. You're saying as like a
you.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Oh,
you're
yeah.
not reading the script.
I'd love to talk to you about some other tips after the segment too about that. That'd be great.
And Jake, since you did a lot of the stories with the team, do you want to talk about your process for actually like writing it differently,
Right.
or how do you work with them to tell them what you want to do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when you're writing to these kind of animations or these infographics, your writing becomes really important that you immerse yourself in what's happening on the screen. So a lot of times, a really simple device for me would be to just say, and look at that right there. You know, that's one easy way to put you in the data. If you're talking to the data, if you're talking to the infographic from another level, it just comes across to me as flat and not as involved. But if, for example, with the marijuana thing you just saw, bring that story to life by saying, making it easy for the editor to come up with some of the visuals for them. I might say, we have this much marijuana in Washington State. That actually equals 250 tons of marijuana, right? Or you stack up this many, buds and it's taller than the Space Needle. Or, descriptive writing like that tees it up for the editor. Very important. It's a good question.
So I think the next thing is I use data a lot online. So I've made versions like the fancy infographic ones that you saw, but then where I use Power BI, or if you can use any kind of visualization tool to basically enhance your story. So I think our takeaway is that just because something might not seem visual or might seem like it's too overwhelming to put on TV, you should still do the story. And using these graphics, I don't know.
I can pull up the website.
Yeah,
if you
pull up
want
the
to.
website. Basically, it allows the user to come and spend more time on your website and engage with the material. So I'll write a text article, and then in a very specific spot, I'll put one of these graphics that adds to the material of the story.
So here's this Taylor posted her package. She wrote,
All the way to the end.
yeah, she wrote a beautiful web script as she always does. Taylor is very good at integrating video and pictures and data on the web, so she's a great writer. Sorry, I'm trying to show off her work.
So nice.
I'm trying to pump you up here.
So this story was about, we're doing some investigation into special education failures in Washington, and it was about excessive restraint and isolation of these kids. So I did a regular story, and then at the end I thought it would be a great opportunity for people to search their school district to see how many isolation and restraint cases there are. So these, if you unclick the map, just click in that gray area. Yeah. You can hover over the map, it'll tell you the hot spots. It's hard to tell, but basically it's just a way for people to interact with the material on their own. How many of you guys do that already in your stories? Anyone that doesn't do it, is there a reason that you don't? Time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did
Tricky.
crap, I forgot to make that thing. I
Yeah.
had a great idea to make.
Yep.
Well, we'll go into more about the analytics and how it affects the content later, but it has worked for people spending more time on the page.
Yep. Power BI with the embed code embeds really easily too. Right, Vera, it kicks out an embed code and it's easy to embed in a web
And you
script.
can do an iframe, and you can also put your own logo on it. And then we also have the Power BI PM here, so if you wanted to ask some questions about it more specifically. But I think that's
Yeah. Lukash is scary smart too.
So-
That's fun to do.
We will actually have a hands-on lab. I think it's on Saturday at
yeah.
11.
Yeah.
I think we're going through and showing how to use Power BI to build this kind of interactive.
So we'll speak more about some materials that you can have at the end. But.
Give us your thoughts. Give us your thoughts on some of the visual stuff we just mentioned.
We'll go into more of the challenges, but anything that you guys have found that works, that we should be thinking of, that works for data on your end?
I usually start with a visualization, like I create it on Tableau, and then I kind of like try to figure out the design for TV, which a lot of times ends up being bar graphs. But I think one of the big takeaways that you said is that you don't need graphics to explain data, so I'll try to apply that. But yeah, I usually start with the visualization first too, and then that eventually comes up because then we'll just put it on the website. We've had trouble embedding it in Tableau.
Check that out. I had actually heard a really great quote this morning in one of the earlier sessions. It was, a bar graph is probably always the best way to do a visualization, but I don't want to live in that world.
Yeah, I'm Jordan Fisher, WUSA. Thank you, family. I was wondering how you balance getting extra information to the viewer with the visualization and the added complexity you can add there with, not confusing them between what you're saying and what you're showing on screen and not trying to present too much. Do you have any best practices for how you do that?
When we did a story on school immunization rates, and we showed some of the graphics on TV after our regular package. Those were way more simplified than the ones that are on our website. So we just took off all the extra busyness and tried to keep it very simple so it didn't overwhelm the person watching at home. That's my advice, is just to keep it simple for that audience. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I just didn't know if there were any, I don't know, just if you had specific examples. We also did one about measles immunization rates, and I built one about how herd immunity works. And the traditional TV folks were, it's too busy.
Right.
It's too busy for TV.
Right. Yeah, I almost feel like my mindset for some of these data stories was to use my visual infographic package as almost a portal to get people. It satisfied the TV audience because, let's face it, the TV audience needs a high level of entertainment, right? And so it satisfies that, but coming out and tagging with something that I could tease to our website, some of those Power BI graphics, maybe tease to Twitter, using the platforms in their own unique ways to try and expand the story. I don't think I'm saying anything you don't already know, but
I was hoping maybe you had a magic wand or something.
I do, actually. Vera's gonna pass those out. Microsoft makes it.
I'm in Denver where they do a lot of graphics for these, and what the graphic artist would tell you is try to make it pick something simple to tell a story about in your data. So you're not trying to tell all of your data in one infographic, in one video, right? You're trying to, like, you were describing it. So if you're talking about how much pot's coming into the state, you're describing it in different ways that gets people thinking and moving along kind of like a timeline. And you watch some of these and you'll start to kind of see how they do that. And we do a lot of these in Denver too, and it is not telling all of your data because there's just no way. I mean, you can't tell it all just talking to somebody, in one of these sessions here. So it's just picking out something really unique and different about that data to tell one little story, one little piece of, and that simplifies it into a way that makes it interesting on television. And then when people want more, they will go and seek it out on these really cool online things that I don't know how to do, but they're super awesome.
They're great, and another reason I love them is that you don't have to tailor make the story for every platform. I found really big success when I play the same thing on TV, Twitter, Facebook, all of that, and that is a godsend. All right, let's go to another challenge, Taylor.
So some of you brought up that it's too complex challenge, that with your daily life or all the stuff you have to do, it just feels overwhelming. And so one of the things that I found helpful is to use visualization tools like we mentioned, Power BI or Tableau or whatever it is that you use. If you use Power BI, you can use that to analyze your data. You can, instead of having to spend all this time, doing it the manual way, you can just dump your data in there, and you can, for certain kinds of stories, you can map it out or see things quickly in that way. There's lots of videos you can watch on Microsoft's website. They have how-to videos and attend these sessions, but using those tools to help just make it simplified for you, I think is a good option. Another option is to have an Excel workshop or some kind of thing at your station where you just maybe ask your news director for an hour to learn basic Excel and teach the newsroom, or basically just kind of get creative in making the skill. I mean, you're all here, so that's a good start. Going to those sessions, the hands-on sessions, but making it a culture where you can learn at your station. You want to talk about next stuff?
So a short question a lot of you are asking is, I can't possibly come up with the idea and scrub the data, cleanse it, verify it, go live. I can't do it all. You know, that would take me 6 months to work that into my beat truck crash fire, coverage thing. And so some of our advice to you is to outsource some of it. Our CFO and controller Sheldon Lee at the station has been an unsung hero in our pilot project and what we do now. Is that sometimes you just gotta find the smartest guy in the room. Turns out he loves data and he knows a lot about data journalism but never talks about it. And so after you have conversations with him, you say, here, maybe just take this Excel spreadsheet or take all this data, process it for me. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and whoever you ask, I mean, if they're not a journalist, you just keep that in mind because you're the journalist, and you still make those same considerations that you make as a journalist. You just use them to help the technical, complex side of things.
So it turns out Washington State's had a lot of wildfires, and it turns out wildfires are really, really well cataloged. Start time, burn time, date, this, that, and the other. And so I went through, it took me a full day, but I went through every wildfire that is burned in Washington State. It was like a 10-hour day. Just sat there and went through, categorized it all, tried to get it onto an Excel spreadsheet. I gave it to Sheldon. He cleans it up. I sit down with Sheldon and we interviewed the data. And we came up with some pretty cool nuggets just about they're starting a lot earlier in Washington State. They're burning a lot longer. And then that took us to the next step to go interview a DNR official about why that may be. And our story came together. And if it wasn't for Sheldon's, expertise, we wouldn't have been able to do it so quickly. Another person to look at are really eager editors who are really interested in doing Adobe After Effects. Jason Goots, we brought him in the pilot project as a part-time, come show us what you can do. He was super eager, and so we tried to steer him toward the Adobe After Effects. He's a super fast learner, and now he's a full-time employee at King 5, and he's our go-to guy with our journalism stuff. So you never know who is gonna help you carry the ball in your data journalism journey.
And we brought in consultants to help us analyze our data for our project. So we brought in these two people from this company called Rebel. And they're Power BI experts and data experts. And so we relied a lot on them. We worked with them hand in hand, but we had never used Power BI. Well, I hadn't. And I learned through that process, but they helped us understand what to do first. So that was a good option. So if your station is open to bringing in outside help, it might be a good start.
Don't be afraid to offload some of that busy work. Any thoughts on that part, you guys? All right, Taylor, you want to talk about the next challenge?
So the I have no time challenge, was it you that mentioned that? Somebody mentioned that that's a big challenge. First advice is to start simple. So you don't have to take this data set that's massive and has a lot of, you can start with clean, simple data and just start with the smallest thing just to practice and see. Look for data that will add context to the news of the day, advance the story, and that might be an easier way for you to pitch it to your manager. So if there's something that happens and you're like, oh, I wonder what data we can look at this, you're probably gonna have a lot more buy-in if it can advance the content that you're already planning on covering. But it can be, we have a couple examples of some smaller stories we've done.
Yeah, so we actually, at the start of the pilot project, were hungry for a story, and a daily story happened to be our new police chief in Seattle, Carmen Best. She's an African-American female, and we wanted to know, hey, how many African American female police chiefs, or even just female police chiefs, are there in the United States? And we thought, oh, that's not really categorized anywhere. There's no big data set on that. So we just got to basics. We had 3 of us sit down at a table. One of us had an Excel spreadsheet. We wrote down the top 50 cities in the United States. We went on the website, got the phone number, or we went to their website. We saw who was the police chief, and we just old school categorized it. And that was a good data journalism story for us, and it was a simple day turn. We gave the information to the graphics tank, or the hub that we have in our company, and they rolled with this one. And we turned it in one day, actually. I was really impressed with that, actually, just the way that everybody pitched in. Another really easy one you can do next week when you get back to your station is gas prices. There was a big gas price spike in the Northwest. Gas prices are really, there's a lot of data online about gas prices over time. This was an easy one as well, really easy to localize. So it could be as simple as a daily turn, as simple as gas prices. It doesn't have to be a super complex data set. Thank God.
Another option, you should always be thinking ahead. Does everybody have a beat in this room? If you have a beat, know what data is available on your beat. Think of evergreen stuff that you can start collecting and kind of build your own data archive. Basically, half the process is getting the data, right? So if you're working on that in the background while you're working on your regular daily stuff, then you'll have something at the ready if something breaks. You're just kind of anticipating what's happening in the same way that you would anticipate what events are upcoming. But you do the same thing with your data. And back pocket story. So everybody have a story that they're always passionate about, that they don't have time to work on, but they kind of have it going. You can do the same thing with your data project. So if you really want to do a data journalism project, just work on it when you have free time, and then you finish it.
Yeah. I use sticky notes a lot on the computer and in real life, and I'm constantly taking notes about stories that I think might be a good data story. And you don't have to start at it being a data story. You could think wildfires. Seems like everything has data attached to it somehow, right? I found that too. Taylor, do you want to show your?
Yeah, so it's important that if you are building this archive of requests and data, that you have a way to manage your records requests. If you don't, I'm sure a lot of you already have a system for keeping track, but I just wanted to share mine in case you're looking for one, because it'll save you time if you're keeping track of what's coming in when and when you have it. So I just keep an Excel sheet with, I have the request date, the record number, the agency I requested it from, information requested, how I requested it, status, just listing all the status, cost, expected date, who I contacted, all those sorts of things. So then I can go back and I know when to follow up again. So I just recommend having some kind of system to stay organized, so you have, and we'll have our, if you can't see that, I can share that with you after. I know it's kind of small.
She purposely blurred it, so you're not.
So I can't steal her voice.
You're not losing your vision. Yeah. She's like an open book. Any questions about that? Hey Jake, did you have a question?
No question.
Any success stories? Anything that you guys have done that helps save time when you're really busy?
There is a cautionary tale, so be on the other end of the spectrum, but I wanted to do it daily with this story about why we needed another district court, and it was based on a formula that I didn't know about, but what I wanted to show was how busy our courts were. So I downloaded some data, some state data, and I was gonna go and I looked for a judge, the district judge, who can maybe explain to me a little bit, just the one column that I needed them to explain to me. And I got a 20-minute lecture from a judge who told me she didn't have 15 minutes to do an interview with me. And she told me all about why it's so important to interview your data, to know every column, and I was like, I told her, look, I know this data, where this comes from, it's reputable, and the problem was that I didn't know the name of the agency that collected the data, so it made me look very questionable, I didn't know what I was doing, but I didn't know the data very well. All I knew was that I was under deadline and I needed to get the story out, and I got scolded and humiliated in front of my colleague and the judge's team. Her employees. But yeah, so maybe know your data before you go.
Be confident in the same way you would.
Yeah, I just need, with any other person, normally I'm like, I don't mind telling you what I don't know, because that's how you get answers, and I wasn't, I wasn't proud, but it just didn't work. It just, I just paced to maybe know the data, even, I don't know.
Yeah, and you should be comfortable with bailing. You know, if you need to stick a knife in it, you just have to do that.
Yeah, and ultimately she forced the knife in, so it was, and I don't even want to touch that story anymore.
I know the feeling.
But that is a good cautionary tale about making sure where your data sources, the variables within them, the experts that you can double check with before you go to the actual source you want to interview with. By the way, my husband is a government lawyer and he's been reading by judges, so you're not the only one. So if that makes you feel any better. But in terms of, if you could have more than one data set, and you frankly can go to them and say, like, there seems to be a question about this data, and I want to run this by you and to make sure that this is correct. Like, this is a source that we seem to have, and what do you think about it? So if you're not sure, but that's the only thing you have to run with, that's another way that you can broach it. Yeah, asking for expertise.
And in my situation, I've started looking through data, and turns out the story that I thought was there was not there. And so I think another cautionary tale is don't force a story that's not there. You might invest time, and then it's just not what you thought it was. So that might happen too.
But actually, that's a really great point about not coming in with data with presuppositions. You always really want to get your hypotheses as best you can from what you actually see. There's such a temptation to think this is going to happen. The immunization rates are going to be this way. That the geography is going to be this way. But if you're that tunnel vision sometimes, then you miss something maybe underlying and bigger that you might have to chase
after. I think I would like to stress the importance of tracking and archiving. I work with a BBC Business newsroom, and all, of course, is more activity driven, not only for the UK but also worldwide with the news service. And having one person for them that they can rely on getting all their data organized and their visualization ready, and that person in this case is me, for them has been of extreme help. And now with Brexit, for example, a lot of things are happening, and most of the times there are big story breaking, and they say, where is the exchange between pound and dollars, or where we can find the prices for a gas retail market? Say, I have already your answer. So most of the time, for example, we made a story on the retail market that in London, in Great Britain, essentially is crashing, and I was able to track with different FOI and different APIs each single shop's closing in the United Kingdom high streets. For them, this was incredible, and at the end we made a 20 minutes TV show only on the topic, because I was able to track that.
Good for you.
So probably also my advice to go to New Year session is probably one day if you have time, because I can understand how many VJ don't have time to go through the data, but if you have the chances of contacting someone or hire someone that could do this for you, it will also be of great help. Also because it will bring us the statistical knowledge, the resources, the networking, able to kind of connect all the different points.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Good job.
Yes. Just gonna say one tip I have as someone who MMJ'd for a while and didn't know someone who do graphics on like a day turn, is look for props you can use to kind of do demonstrations. I used to go to the dollar store in the middle of the shift like all the time. I had a set of erasers that was like taxi cabs, and then I had like fake money that I would use. Also, you know how you get those credit card offers all the time? Save those stupid fake credit cards. How many times do you have to show a credit card or a debit card in a story? And if you just have a bunch of those on hand, you can do all kinds of stuff with that. So when I MMJ'd, I used a lot of props instead, which is helpful. You can do the same stuff, you get your close-up shots and everything, but the dollar store is a great place for, on a budget. And then I had a drawer full of like weird stuff that for some reason did come up from time to time.
You gotta keep as much stuff as you can, right?
Yeah.
I get props all over the place. You never know when you need it.
So I'd say that's one option, non-graphic.
Nice, love that.
I have a question. How about pitching like a story for like a small newsroom, because I tend to do my graphics and request the data, clean it. I have to do everything, right? So as far as like pitching how long it's gonna take, we know we have to like do it in do kind of like the back pocket approach, but what's like maybe an effective way of like pitching a story to someone when you know that you have your daily responsibilities?
Should we move on to how do I sell it to the managers
Good
next?
segue.
You are good.
Do you play her?
Her notebook has
Stop,
special
you saw the
information.
reason. So, Taylor, why don't you expound on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, to answer your question was how, when you don't know how much time it's gonna take, how do you pitch it?
Yeah,
Well,
it's a tough sell, right? I mean, because it takes a long time and a lot of resources.
I mean, I guess if you have, my advice is if you have an idea of what you might find in there, I mean, I would start with what you think it's gonna, what the benefit is gonna be to the station by having you go through that time. So, you know, even though we were saying that you might not, your hypothesis might not end up being true, if you requested something and you're like trying to find a specific thing, I would start with what's the news value. And I mean, I think you can pitch a good story to your boss that way if you try to show how it's gonna make you stand out from your competitors and how it's an enterprise piece of content. That's if you know what the story's gonna be.
Manager Russ?
I'll just say, as their manager, what works for me is when they're thinking 2 or 3 steps down with the story. Yes, they're going to tell the first story, but what is that going to look like in the first show that we show it in? How are we going to spin it for the next day part, whether it's a nightside story or a dayside? Are we going to bring a guest in to talk with the anchors or the reporter on set? Have a story that a story about how that story will live on your product. You know, we're a TV station, but we have a great website as well, and how you can keep it alive beyond day one. The wildfire story and the immunization stories that Taylor and Jake did last year, we were just at lunch and I said, we got to update those so that we can pull them out of our pocket as soon as the wildfire season starts, or as soon as we get the next dump of immunization data, which is a big issue in the Pacific Northwest now because we have a big vaccine resistance movement, I would say.
And I will say that some of the frustrations I think audiences often have is when there's so much investment in a great data visualization or a database, like a homicide database, or like you said, wildfires, immunizations, and the station or the outlet does not keep it up. Because that way you're trying to earn some kind of trust and relationship with someone, and they are going to you because like, I want to know the latest information about, you know, laptop robberies from my cafe, you know, in my neighborhood, or, you know, what my home prices are when in case of an earthquake or a wildfire. And then you just stop, right? So you're building this relationship that you want to kind of curry that. And so at the same time, while you're trying to practice, some data you might want to think about, which our Excel PM did this morning. She's here in the back, and she's wearing an I Love Excel t-shirt. But she used census data, right? Census 2020 is coming up. So their census of past and projection. So even just using government available, reasonably unassailable data to do stories on that, and then you can tailor it, look at projections, do all the steps that he said about it, and at the same time you're doing, you don't have to sell the story, you don't have to sell the data in that case, right?
Yeah. And I might even just build on that a little bit. I almost worked in reverse for a recent story. It was at the end of our reel here with where people are immigrating from. You almost talk, anecdotally, everyone's always talking about Seattle being so diverse and we're seeing so much growth. And my pitch was, hey, the census data is going to come out. The data doesn't lie. Let's try to answer that question once and for all. And that was a good pitch to kind of work backwards. And then Taylor, you were talking also about showing proven success with other data stories is a good way to pitch it.
Yeah, or if you don't think your managers are gonna buy into you just doing data all the time, I mean, maybe just start with one story and show how it's successful. Kind of do your own little pilot, you know, where you just come to them with the analytics, which will show you what ours were, to show how it can be impactful for your newsroom. And the whole, I mean, we mentioned a little bit that recycling the stories. I mean, not even just updating that immunization data, but we've used the graphics we made for immunization stories, for our tunnel traffic story. we've been able to pull those stories back because other news events have happened where it became relevant again. So if you wanna try to find topics that are likely to be relevant again, and then you can get the most bang for your buck, you'll have a more success with your managers.
Yeah, the best pitch of all, in my opinion, is, boss, I can do more with less. And if it is, I will do one story for you and it will air 10 times in the next year or 2 years, or we'll be able to run it in perpetuity every time an Orca story comes up. It seems to work pretty well too. So let's talk for a second about the results that we've seen. We've talked a lot about the shareability of these kinds of stories. They work really well on all platforms. We put the web department to the test to find out exactly how our stories are doing. Taylor's immunization, this is all relative to a typical story that you might see on king5.com. The immunization story, 500% more of an audience. Our marijuana story, our Viaduct story, they just do really, really well. And I'm a firm believer in that the data doesn't lie. And people are looking for a non-biased approach to the news, and this is a really important, good way to do it. That's what I believe.
You're giving them a tool to engage. I mean, the goal is to have people engage with your content longer, right? So now they have one extra step that they can learn something from. So I think that's why you're seeing the engagement, where there's stuff they can click around and do.
Yeah. Plus they're easy to watch. If a video that looks cool is on your Facebook page, you're gonna hit play. Anecdotally, I feel like I've seen a lot of growth with videos on Facebook as well, and YouTube. Any questions about that?
Any success stories with your managers, pitching ideas that are data focused?
I was just gonna suggest anybody who I work hyper local, but you could, I've requested weapons data for our local school districts, and not just like what they have online, but okay, when you say gun, what kind of gun? Are we talking about a rifle or shotgun? Weapons, pepper spray, everything. So I got this big data set, and now every time there's a kid arrested for having a weapon on campus or whatever, I've gone back to it so many times. So whatever data reporter's covering it, then I can have a breakout, more investigative, quick, easy presentation, but it just shows that like we're tracking this, and you can, it's almost a reassurance, like yeah, there was a gun found, but for the past 10 years, there's never been a gun found on that campus, or maybe it's the opposite and it's happening a lot more. So that's just a great one to have in your back pocket when you talk about just, I mean, it's a very specific example, but there are data sets that if you keep updated, you're guaranteed to use them over and over.
Curious, how'd you get that data?
From the State Department of Education, because the local districts suck, so they're not gonna give it to me, but the State Department has found just so much easier to get data from.
And that's guns taken away from students in the school? Or
Weapons seized or reported.
On school grounds.
So, and however they define weapons.
Exactly, but then, the exciting part is kind of asking, well, what do you know, it might just say weapon, it might say gun or other weapon, whatever's online. So if you ask them, hey, what's behind other, and do you have a further breakdown, they should, because I think they have to report it to the feds, so.
One of my favorite of all graphic stories I've seen came from KUSA on guns. Maybe it was
WUSA?
Yeah. Are you W?
She was from KSA.
Yeah.
The corner was KUSA, I'm WUSA.
Oh, you're WSA, okay. It was, Chris Vanderveen did a story on guns after the shooting. And it was very well researched and just beautiful. So we have a lot of resources. One of them in the Northwest has been Microsoft. Vera, do you want to talk?
Yes, so you might have heard of us. We are located in Washington, but before I actually even talk about that, we do have resources available. If you see all the notebooks that are on your chairs or hopefully in your bags, there is a link there for aka.ms/data journalism playbook. This is something that this team put together. They took all this knowledge and they said, we can hoard it, or we can share it. And so they've decided to share it. So it really does document not only, the journey they went through, but like all the missteps, all the fallacies, and what are some of the things, because I did look at it once for.
There's like a resource guide towards the end where basically it's just, walking you through where you can get more information, learn tools, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And you might have seen me stumble once in a while. It's because I'm actually new to this team, to the Microsoft Modern Journalism team. And the team, as I've mentioned before, is actually less than a year old. It did start as data journalism program, but we're always working with newsrooms and partners with Excel and for Power BI. And as we said, that Lukash Pawlowski here is the Power BI PM. He's gonna be with Kathleen Crowley of the Albany Times Union, and they're gonna, actually it's a workshop. It'll be like about 30 to 35 computers, where you're gonna go sit down and they will walk you through. And this is again, the learnings that we had with the King 5 relationship as well as other relationships, just what's the best way for you guys to get going so that you can do these kinds of visualizations, like when you get outside the room, when you're on the plane, you know, or whatever. Like we want you to get you going when it's hot. And we want to say a little bit why we're doing this. Again, I said we're less than a year old. You know, Microsoft's mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to do more, right? And so our mission is derived from that we want to really help drive storytelling innovation. We want to empower, you know, reporting, and we want to digitally transform the news industry. You know, what you guys do to create to have an informed citizenry, you do it through storytelling, we do it through tech. And so this is why we want to be there with you guys to help you, because my background is, I was at a paper called a chain called Knight Ridder, does not exist anymore. I worked at local newspapers and magazines, a lot of them don't exist anymore. My old newsroom, which I shall not name, they won a Pulitzer Prize, and then there were layoffs the following 2 weeks, right? I mean, this is not an unusual story. And I was at Yahoo for 9 years, or 6 CEOs, take your pick of however you define it. But we have seen, you know, the travails that have happened in this, and we're at a point, well, we're past that point, where we really need to rely on each other. And I love the culture of collaboration that's happening. IRE has always had that culture of collaboration. Congratulations on the 25th anniversary. By the way, if you're looking about data sets and resources, IRE also has them. But so I would really encourage you to collaborate here. Take our notebooks. I've got more. It's heavy. Take as much as you want. Download the Data Journalism Playbook. Make friends here and get together. And then come talk to us either now or later. I got a credit card. We can have coffee. We can have more.
Drinks on her.
Drinks and lobster, whatever. Russ was trying to get lobster.
I told you it's a good partnership.
And then, you know, I have to say we're really, really proud of what King 5 has done, because, you know, okay, part of it is I have a print bias. You know, it's like, this is the talent. You know, the talent looks great. What else can they do? And obviously they showed, besides withstanding like 1 million honeybee stings, how rich they know how to explore a story, and how much they are responsive to their audiences, and how many platforms they know they have to respond to. And actually that's the whole, you know, industry is going towards that, right? To understand how this data looks on video as well as print, social, and all that kind of stuff. So I hope you will join us on Saturday for sure. Teresa's back there if you want to ask her Excel questions. Rukesh is here if you want to ask Power BI questions, because we've got a few, but let's see if there's any last minute questions for this session in particular.
Let us know, what do you guys want to talk about? Is there anything that's come up?
I have a question for you guys. You mentioned that database that's been helpful to you. Have you guys found any databases that you keep coming back to that you think we all should look for in our markets? When we talk about building that archive of data? Yeah.
Probably about 2 years ago now, we did a story on the records of various types of school discipline actions. In Florida, there's something called, I guess it was physical, there was fighting, then there was like physical attack, and for whatever reason, our county was #1 in the state by a mile, and like 5 of the top 10 schools in the state were in our county. So we did a story called A Dangerous Duval, and we got the data set, this is probably in 2017, so it was like the 2015-2016 school year. Did that story a year later when the new data set comes out. We grabbed it, analyzed it. We weren't gonna do an update story, never actually did the full update, but every time there's this or that at school, hey, let's pull the records on that one. So, I mean, this is Florida, but I'm sure most states have something like that with school discipline data that gets recorded.
I introduced you to Sheldon, our CFO, and I email him ideas all the time. And for example, the other day, I was at the restaurant the other day, and they had a poor rating on the health, and I said, do you know, maybe you could look through some of the data from the local health department? And he's all over it. He just really enjoys doing that. So, yeah, he's constantly trying to gather that stuff as well. It's fun to get stuff on the side.
Another one? Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
airport data sets that I use all the time that I've like pushed out during previous NICAR presentations all the time, but I made a bit.ly for it. There's a bit.ly / all lowercase news data _ plane crash, one word, and then news data _ airport. Those are two of my favorite data sets. The first one on news data _ plane crash, you can look up by airport what plane crashes have happened. You can look up by aircraft type. So like if you have a small airplane that crashes in your market, you can go look and see how many other types of like that model Cessna have also crashed. You can see what kind of issues they've had. You know, a plane's going to crash again. So it's like, you know, you can put it in, and it works. I've gotten it to pull up on my cell phone, okay? So like if you're out in the field, you can actually pull that one. And then news data _ airport, again, it's all lowercase. That one, you can see like how full planes are when they take off from your airport. So you can actually see like how many empty flights there are, which is super cool. Like if your airport's thinking about expanding and asking taxpayers for a ton of money, is it really worth adding a terminal? Like how full are your flights really? There's that, it's on time arrivals and departures. I mean, you can pull, it's RETA data, so you can pull.
URL again?
bit.ly / news data, all lowercase news data, _ plane crash, and then bit.ly / news data _ airport.
I've also been always very impressed with the amount of data that people and municipalities collect but don't have posted online too. That's always surprised me. Get a website.
Okay,
It's an old, oh yeah, do you want more? No. This is just an old NICAR presentation, but the airport one and the plane crash one, people have come back to me multiple times and said like, oh yeah, I use that all the time now.
Nice.
They're awesome, breaking news.
You can have that for
Crime
trains,
is just
too.
FBI. So.
Yeah, I found a really good data set for railroad crossings too.
Oh, really?
Similar to that. It's good to have on hand.
By the way, I do want to plug other beats. I know oftentimes it's crime, business, you know, natural disasters, but oftentimes if you want to really, both to reporters as well as to audiences, think of your sports stories and think of your entertainment stories. One of these things, I'm just going to tell you, but one of the things on my list I've always wanted to do is do a Power BI visualization. Maybe Mukesh can help me, of the age differences between Hollywood leading men and leading women for 100 years, and looking at that, and then chatting with Gina Davis Institute about that. You know, but if you could just think about like how you can give a serious, and it is serious issues through these data visualizations for things that you would think of are lighter stories. And I oftentimes think of like, you know, celebrity business women are often undermined in some ways. Say what you will about Kim Kardashian or Taylor Swift, they are very good business women. So if you didn't have them classified under, you know, entertainment, how would they fare in the greater world of like their retail and stuff? So I think these are all interesting avenues that you could think outside the usual, and it might make you cheerier at some level as well. And also that data, again, is something that you can repeat Oscar time, right? Or Golden Globes or things like that. Maybe you could do that story.
No, I know. I'm thinking about doing that now.
The other thing I had collected for a story was, so in the state of Texas, school districts can apply for hazardous transportation funding so that their transportation department can allocate a certain amount of money for picking up kids within a 2-mile radius of the campus. So even though they can cross, it's dangerous, so they can have that money to pick them up even though they're close by. And this comes in handy because when a kid was struck by a vehicle last month, I was like, you know what, I still have that information, and I pulled it up and I was like, yep, that road is a hazardous route. And the school district got all kinds of mad with us, but I mean, it was factual. And so, and I had that for like every school district that gave it to me. And then I asked for them for like a more recent one, it was the same thing. But that really helps, you know, whenever there's an accident with a student anywhere near the campus. If you're in Texas, I mean, that kind of information helps. Oh, and immigration data, I'm sorry. Border Patrol has some stats, so many stats. It's really, you have to be very careful with it because sometimes it's skewed in a way where they make it look like a trend is happening when it's not. But they do have some other statistics that are pretty reliable. If you want to look at nationalities that come in through the different years and just
you.